Thank you for having me. Let me make sure my mic's on. All right, yes, thank you so much for being here today. As you heard, we're going to be talking about how to craft compelling multi-platform storytelling strategies and really looking at how you can take a narrative and span it across various mediums. I really like board games. Are there other board game players out there in the audience? Yes. I have regular game nights almost once a week. And I think part of my love for them and part of my love for multi-platform and transmedia storytelling is that you're taking these various pieces and figuring out how to put them together. Do you all know the term transmedia storytelling? Are there some of you that might not? Just to level set, it is when you take a core idea and then you put it out across various mediums. So you put it on a film, you put it in a documentary, a VR experience, an AR experience, and it's different than cross-platform marketing where you take one piece of content and put it out on social media, put it in a film, etc. It's where you make each part of the story uniquely placed across the various mediums, and much like a puzzle, the overall story is the full completed puzzle, and then the pieces are the particular mediums and the particular pieces of the story that you're taking and putting all together. So before we jump way into it, I want to take you into a little story world for a moment. We're going to jump into the near future and meet V, who is a mother that is struggling to figure out what is causing her daughter's mysterious illness. And one day when she's cleaning up her daughter's room, she notices her VR headset and tries it on and stumbles into a social VR experience. She, as many of you maybe can relate to in your first social VR experience, is not doing so well. She's like running into the wall and talking to people that actually aren't people, they're lamps. And so Zara notices that V is struggling, and she is a corporate tech climber who's a little bit disillusioned and goes to the VR space to unwind. So she makes an unlikely friendship with V, and together they start discussing the daughter's mysterious illness and realize that there might be something bigger going on. So they team up to try and solve the mystery of what is making the town sick. And as they're doing this, they're walking this tightrope of trying to make things better before they get worse. So that's a little story in the future, and we'll come back to it. But now let's jump back into multi-platform storytelling. So how do you get attention? This is a huge struggle that a lot of marketers are facing right now, and you all probably can relate to. And the answer to that really is to create worlds where audience fully immerse themselves as active participants. As we know, there's just so much content out there right now, and people are feeling overwhelmed, overstimulated, they're oversaturated with content. So they're really craving more engaging stories and experiences, and that's what captures attention. It's a way to cut through the noise and really reach whoever your target audience is and make meaningful connections with the story. So today we're going to be exploring how to create liquid content that is able to flow into the different mediums and adapt appropriately for that. And we are going to talk about how to create a story world for your audience to inhabit so they can become active participants and even co-creators, which is going to make them feel like they're traveling through an experience rather than having it fed to them and feeling overly bombarded by it. And another nice thing of crafting a story this way and working with transmedia storytelling strategies is that you are able to have the users have different levels of depth and involvement. So there may be one person that just wants to sit and passively watch something, while another person is really interested in games like myself and wants something to solve, wants to be more immersed. And so you can reach various people where they're at through that. So first, let's look at some examples. And this is a story that expands beyond the screen. Transmedia storytelling, that term originated in the film world, and so there's really good examples from the film world about how to do it. One that immediately came to mind for me was the Blair Witch Project. I was too young and too scared of horror movies to actually watch it when I was a kid, but I still remember the marketing for it. And what they did is that a year before the film even came out, they launched a mysterious website, and this is early web days too, where they had the lore of the Blair Witch, and they even had a really creepy journal from the main character talking about it's in preparation of her going to experience the things that she was going to experience in the film, talking about the lore, writing it. It had people talking immediately, because what is this weird website that just went up, and what is this lore, and is this real, is this fact, is this fiction? They also put on a Ken Burns-style documentary on Sci-Fi Channel, and none of this stuff was tied to the film or saying, hey, this is to promote the film. It was all just building the lore, building questions, building anticipation for what people didn't even know. They also put missing person posters across college campuses because they knew that the college student demographic was one of their main target audiences. And then before the film, all the actors on IMDb were listed as missing, and they wouldn't let them appear in any press conferences. So they were really building a story world, like we're talking about, for the audience to inhabit and question and get excited about. Another example is the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, of which I'm a fan of, and how obviously it is transmedia because it's comic books, films, shows, and they're spreading it out, and also it's a full story world where you can enter it at different points. If you just watch one show, you're going to be able to understand that show, but if you've immersed yourself in the full story world and the full lore, there's so many Easter eggs and there's so many interconnected pieces of the story that you understand, and Marvel does a really good job of getting a user base and an audience that is super excited for the next thing because it builds on this story world. Ready Player One is another example. They're getting ready to launch their Readyverse, which is a metaverse tied into the story lore of Ready Player One. And then also Meow Wolf is another example. It's not necessarily, again, transmedia storytelling, but when I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, I went into the House of Eternal Return, which was a Meow Wolf experience, and I was so amazed by how there were these different levels of interaction that you could get into. So for some people, they were just wandering around, taking it all in, but they also had books that you could read. They had an escape room style puzzle to solve. They had stations all around where they were telling different parts of the story. And so myself, being a story nerd, I spent like 4 hours there really diving into the lore of that space. So through all of these, you can see how building out this transmedia storytelling strategy and these story worlds is a great way to engage your audience. But you need to know your why, of why you're doing it, and understand what mediums to use. Working in the XR space and consulting with clients, a lot of times people will be really excited about the wow factor of these technologies, and I'll have clients come to me and be like, I want to do a VR experience, and I say, okay, why do you want to do it? Why do you want to put this in VR? And really, many times there's not an answer beyond that. As we know, and you all are very tech savvy here too, the wow factor can only last so long. You really need a compelling story to carry audiences along and to make them interested. And knowing which mediums work for which type of stories is key. So I'm going to give you a little breakdown, put in very high-level terms. Film is really good for creating emotional connections and for connecting people into characters as well as more linear storytelling. Books are great for really complex stories where you need to be able to tell more than you can do just in an hour-long film. Video games obviously are good for gamification and for accomplishments and challenges and flexing that muscle within your story. VR is great for immersion and agency, and AR is great for enhancing physical reality. And domes, which is what we're going to be talking about today too, is great because it can create a collective and shared immersive experience. So you want to take a story-centric approach, which means that you're not picking the medium first and then figuring out why and how you're going to put the story in there. You want to think about your stories and how you could expand them beyond into the different mediums and why you're putting them in those specific mediums. So to keep it even more simplified, if you want a lived experience and part of your story that is very lived, put it in VR. If you want exploration and explanation of large concepts from your story, put it in a book. If you want to create an emotional connection as a piece of your story, put it in film. And if you want to gamify it, you can put it in a video game. Tech is not the focus. It's about technology is about a means for distributing the story. And so You want to think about what mediums will contribute to your story and learn what they're good at. So as we're talking now, you can think about what is the particular story world that you're creating, and then what mediums would you like to put it into, and why would the story come alive in that particular medium. So now I want to introduce you to the project that we're working on, and really the purpose of talking about it is to give you grounded examples and concepts to work with these larger, more amorphous ideas. So we're creating a transmedia storytelling experience showcasing BIPOC leaders using AI, VR, and AR for good. And we are making this story world because there's a lot of fear out there right now about what the near future is going to hold for us all. And much of the mainstream media is focusing on worst case scenarios. While that's important, we also need best case scenarios out there, and we need to highlight those so we have a direction to steer our collective ship of the future towards, as well as what we want to steer away from. And we are also focusing on BIPOC voices and others from marginalized communities, because in the tech world, those can be voices that are oftentimes left out. So we want to hear what people from marginalized communities have to say about what we vision for the near future. And the reason we decided to do this in a transmedia approach was not because we thought, oh, that would be cool to have this transmedia storytelling experience. No, it was story first. We realized as first we were developing out a narrative film that we wanted to also have a way to be able to give people a lived experience of what it could be like for AI and technology to be used for good. And then we also thought, well, this is such a huge project, wouldn't it be great to document it along the way and be able to show that? And so we have these different pieces that are going to enhance the story together, which introduces you to that it is sitting at the intersection of fact and fiction. We're doing a 3-part experience. One is a documentary film, we have an immersive dome, and then a narrative film. And the narrative film, like I said, is kind of where it all started and is the story from earlier that I was telling you about V and Zara, and these two characters that are in the near future trying to figure out how to make their world better using evolved AI. The dome experience is a space that is going to be a multisensory dome experience where participants are invited into helping to envision what the near future could look like and use AI for good. And the documentary is going to be documenting the progression of both the dome experience as well as our development of the narrative story, the research we're doing for that, and interviewing thought leaders in the space, creatives in the space, really highlighting how these technologies could be used for good, as well as looking at what are some of the more troubling or probably problematic things that we need to consider for the near future so we can steer it in a good direction. So the dome experience is able to build the audience and build the story and have them co-create the narrative. And then the documentary gets the behind the scenes, and the narrative is really the answer to what is the seed point in the dome experience of the story. It's the resolution of all of that. So that's a bit of the arc of it all. And another way to think of it is as a tree. The dome is what is drawing the roots, drawing the nourishment, the crowdsourced information of what people want to envision and how they interact with this media. The documentary is the trunk, which is putting these pieces all together and growing it up. And then the narrative is the leaves, which are showing the story world and the creative expression that comes throughout this overall experience. They can be viewed both separately, so somebody could just see the documentary or could just experience the immersive dome, but all together they create a bigger picture as well. What is so important as you are considering your own experience and considering taking on transmedia marketing is having a narrative through line throughout, like we're talking about. A lot of times in the marketing world too, it can be over-reliant on a wow factor, especially when working with immersive technologies, or, oh, this will just be a cool thing to catch people's attention. But if it's missing a core theme or a story to connect people in with, it ends there at the wow factor. So thinking about how to create a narrative through line, a theme for whatever type of experience you're creating is so important. For our case study, the theme, the through line, is AI for good and how we're going to use it that way. We're also looking at how technology is a tool. It can be used for good or for bad, depending on who is wielding it. So those are some core concepts we're exploring. And then we are connecting in with these two characters. And having, from the film world, having characters to connect with is a core way to give your audience and your participants somebody to go along the journey with. So we have V and Zara as the characters in the narrative film, and they also appear in the Dome experience. And then we have myself and Annie in the documentary, and any resemblance to V and Zara, as you'll see in a future slide, is purely coincidental to Annie and I. But we have us as participants in the documentary leading that thread too. So even if you are doing an immersive experience where you're putting the audience as the core character, experiencing in a first-person point of view, having some kind of guiding force or some way to string the audience along with a narrative through line is so crucial and important. And it's a lot like a board game, thinking about how you're going to take these different pieces and put them all together. So let's talk about the documentary a little bit more. Like I've mentioned, this is the making of the Dome. We're going to be doing interviews, and we're going to put our findings in this documentary. There'll be two central characters, myself and Annie, in a participatory documentary, which means it's when the filmmakers are a key part of it, like, what's his name, who does all the films? Somebody know who's always in his films? Michael Moore, thank you. Yes, it's like that. And so we, as the filmmakers, are going to be on a quest to understand what the near future holds for emerging technologies. And myself, I'm coming from a long background of being in the emerging tech and immersive tech worlds. Annie is a bit newer to it. So again, we're having the audience be able to have characters to connect to and to journey with. As we are making explorations and discoveries, the audience can make them as well. The next piece is the immersive dome, and really from the beginning of the experience, you're having them enter into a story world. And so with this experience, there's going to be a pre-event onboarding sequence where V and Zara come to request that the audience member, once they sign up to be a part of this dome experience, help them on their mission to envision what a future could look like using immersive technologies for good and using AI for good. They'll take a test to figure out their roles in the experience. And on the front end, this is a way to be able to already bring them into the world. They're starting to become engaged, they're answering questions, and they're kind of like with Hogwarts, they're getting sorted into their different schools, their different classes. On the back end, it's a way for us to gather information from their answers to create a semi-personalized experience. Each one of the archetypes will have a different, slightly different experience that they're going through, and so it's a way for us to gather that information and data. And the story begins as soon as they walk up to the dome. They're handed a box with, again, semi-personalized items. This is going to be a sensorium, so they'll have tastes, touches, smells, and these will be based on the different roles that they've been assigned. So already, if they said they love the taste of strawberry, they have strawberries in their box. They're feeling like they have a custom experience for them. In the dome, it's also going to be an immersive experience where strangers become companions in a shared sensory experience. So there'll be moments where it is a bit of a branching narrative. V and Zara are going to come projected on the dome and tell a bit of the story and how they've transported themselves back from the near future in order to get the help from the people of our time. Because right now we're at a turning point where things could go really well or really bad. So we're bringing the audience into the story. They're co-participants in envisioning what a future could be. And at certain moments in the experience, they will vote on which direction they want to go, what they want to do, and the experience will unfold from there. We're going to be using projection mapping, a bit of improvisational theater, as well as the senses, and as well as AI generative images and videos to create a semi-personalized experience every time somebody interacts with the dome. And at first, the pilot will be in one location, but eventually it will be a mobile dome experience that can pop up in various cities and various places. The narrative film, like you've heard, and here's the characters, again, no approximation to myself or Annie. The narrative film is, again, going to be exploring how and envisioning how the near future will look for us and how we can use these technologies, both the challenges that may exist in the near future and how AI evolved could help us to solve some of those bigger issues, and the complexities of walking the tightrope of making things better without making them worse. It's a little bit Ready Player One meets Everything Everywhere All at Once, if you can picture what that would be like. So the journey that we're taking people on is educational with the documentary, it's immersive with the immersive dome, and it's entertaining with the narrative film. And of course, there's intersections of all of those things. They'll all hold some pieces of those three elements. But through having these various entry points to the same conversation, we will engage different demographics, which is something that many marketers are trying to figure out how to do right now. The different touch points really make it so that if somebody is only interested in more of the educational side of things, they love watching documentaries, they will have an entry point into our story. Or if somebody would never watch a documentary but loves fiction films, they'll watch the narrative film. Or if they really want to have an immersive experience, they can do the immersive dome. They can also do all three, and perhaps as they enter one point, they'll be excited to then travel through the full journey of the full story, putting the pieces together, having this element of mystery too, like you remember from the Blair Witch example. If you build out some story that has to be put together, that people have to figure out, it's going to make your audience talk to each other, try to figure it out with one another, share about it. And so you're naturally building buzz around your story just by having these key elements within them. We're also building this out asynchronously, and that's okay. You can launch different parts of your story in different moments. And what's beautiful about it is that in this asynchronous approach, one, they build off and learn from one another and inform each other. And then once they are all completely launched too, then they can live together as a collective whole of the story. And you can even extend out different parts too. There's a potential there when you have a strong foundation of a story world that you've created to then extend it beyond. And as new technologies emerge, you are, again, with this liquid content, able to make it flow into the various mediums and pathways, and giving your audience a rabbit hole to go down in the process when you create that intrigue, when you create that mystery for them to solve and put together the puzzle pieces of your story. And beyond, what I'm just talking about right now, that there are limitless opportunities to expand the story world and create new touch points. So as you have this strong foundation, as the story then is put out there, you can start to think about, okay, where else, what other mediums could we put this story into? For ourselves, we're already thinking, well, wouldn't an AR app be so cool once we build this foundation? Or maybe we make a social VR experience because a lot of the narrative story happens in social VR. Maybe it will be a novel someday if we get it complex enough about the lore of it. Or maybe even a board game, which would be really fun for me because I'd love to play a board game of our story on game nights. So you can think for yourselves too, once you create the foundation and identify the mediums for the first part of your story that are going to work the best to tell your story, you can keep it small, starting with 3 or 2, and then once you have that foundation, you can build it out into all of these new opportunities. And as new technologies come about, which inevitably they are at lightning speed, you'll be able to put your story world and put your content into those new technologies as well. So there has never been a better time than now. I truly do feel that this is the future of marketing and the future of storytelling, is creating transmedia storytelling experiences that cross the boundaries of the various mediums and are able to build an entire space for your audience to inhabit, to engage with, to get excited about. And what's really cool about it too is that your audience becomes co-authors in the story, especially with more immersive experiences. An amazing piece of that is that you're able to have the users have agency within the story and be able to co-create it with you. And that builds a fan base that is going to be loyal to you way beyond whatever you're doing right now in this moment. So it builds really sustainable user base because you are creating these stories and you're creating this audience that is so deeply invested in the story world that you've brought them into that they want to continue to play and evolve it along with you. With that, I'll put my info up here. My name is Nisha Burton. Reach out to me. I love talking about these things, and so if you want to talk about your own ideas about how to take a story, an experience, a narrative, and span it across mediums, I'm always here for that. Also, you'll notice the URL nishaburton.com/reality. That'll give you more information about this specific case study that I shared with you today. And you can even see the full pitch deck there. And then you can follow me at Nisha Creating. And we also have another handle for this experience specifically, which is immersive branding on Instagram. So thank you so much. It's great talking to you today.